He has analytical skills in data visualization, context analysis, and technical knowledge of food security, nutrition, and market. Also joining us online. Then we have Dr. Sehrish. Uh, she will also be joining online from Lahore. Dr. Sehrish is assistant professor at she is member of International Studies Association USA, and her research interests include national security and warfare studies. She also had, several violent extremism and peace building in Pakistan. So she looks at the resilient part of it. Now we are happy that she's here, and she'll be speaking on the post-pandemic blue economy, Vision 2030, and sustainable socio-economic development. Then we have Dr. Babar Shahbaz from University of Agriculture, Faisalabad. Dr. Babar is Associate Professor at the Institute of Agriculture Extension and Rural Development and Director Academics at the University of Agriculture, Faisalabad. He has served as chair outreach program at the U.S. Pakistan Center for Advanced Studies in Agriculture and Food Security at the Faisalabad University. He is a visiting research fellow of SDPI as well. With a doctorate degree in Agriculture Extension, Rural Development, and specialization in Rural Livelihoods, NRM, Agriculture Extension, and Rural Development, Dr. Shahbaz has coordinated various inter and transdisciplinary research projects funded by international and local agencies. I would like to welcome Dr. Shahbaz, who is also online. We were expecting Dr. Fateh Mari, the Vice Chancellor of Sindh University of Tandojam, but he was asked for a meeting to join in Sindh government. So he was traveling, so he regretted that because of that meeting he may not join us. But next time, or he may send us some of the messages for the conference. He has served as a chief economist and project in the government of Sindh. Then we have Mr. Salman Danish, research associate with SDPI. He has done a paper for the UNEP, decade launch and ecosystem restoration. He contributed the paper on marine ecosystem of Pakistan. So he will be presenting his paper, policy paper here in this conference. He had done his master's in international program manager with the think tank JTHR, and he also studies and disasters. So we will have this panel with us today. Starting, I would request Mr. Mehman later on. I will just give the concept of this panel basically. As I just mentioned, that Pakistan was chosen to host the World Environment Day this year, 2021 in June. And it was the time when the UN has also launched the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So in this background and context, at that time we have decided that we will take it further and also hold this panel because ecosystem restoration is important. Now, when we see that our environment, our climate is being hitting us badly in terms of health and otherwise sustainability and resilience. In the background of the COVID, particularly, we see that we cannot survive if we are not looking at the nature-based solution. And that if we are thinking of nature-based solution ecosystem, which is very important for the humanity. With the launch, I guess Mehman Saab would speak more on the decade and its launch. But probably the bottom line message for ecosystem restoration and observance of the decade is that in next 10 years, from 2021 to 2030, which is also coinciding with the SDG targets, that we have to do 10 big action. We have to take 10 big action to restore ecosystem where we have to live. Ecosystem, you know, it ranges from forest to farmland to freshwater, ocean, coast, mountain, and other many areas, peatland and urban lands. So these are the resources of the nature or the system. Together they call ecosystem, which actually we have to think of restoring it. With this brief note, I would for his special remarks on this issue. Over.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues and friends at STPI and everyone. So, as the challenge with this hybrid or online has come bigger, that we may not be dedicated like supporting one event, as now I had to jump quickly to our event in Korea. So this is how we are in the new norm of the situations, that how we really work more efficiently. So now, before I jump out, let me quickly put this first to congratulate Pakistan for hosting a wonderful World Environment Day, and that was also the launch of the Ecosystem UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. And big thanks to STPI and IUCN colleagues who really manage all the events on the behalf of United Nations Environment Program. Now, taking cue from there, that how the ecosystem restoration, this UN decade, and align with the also decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and also align with the COP26 decisions we just finished, and align with the COP already online was happened, and next year we have that this like quite a bit of a myth about the ecosystem restoration, as per the phrase or the name is, that people think about the restoring the marine life, restoring the rivers, restoring the forests, highlands, deserts, and so on. But that is not stand-alone projects or the programs. Basically, it's way of our life, like sustainable development. So it comes with every action we take, whether be on the production side, and take anything in the production, take the textiles, take the food, take the automobiles, take the mobile phones, take the housing, anything you talk about the production, energy, whatever you talk. How we producing the things, like energy, suppose out of COVID, there's a lot of stimulus packages are coming, and especially focusing on the exports. And again, energy is one of the biggest challenges in Pakistan, even for the export industry. So how we are bringing our production of energy, like renewable energy per se, as a green energy, or we call the on the whole our production systems, energy efficient lighting, whether we are really efficiently use the energy that we have, and also whether we are, let's say, going to the electric mobility from the fossil fuels or electric vehicles and so on. And this goes with everything, with the food systems, with the textiles, you name it, housing and so on, even water and so forth. So when you look on the sustainable consumption and production, basically that helps to restore the ecosystems. That helps to address the three planetary challenges, what we call the nature and biodiversity loss, climate action, and pollution action. So everything is integrated. And again, in my capacity, because in addition to my coordination role, I'm also the global coordinator for COVID-19 humanitarian and medical. So how we are really restoring the health services, how we are restoring the waste management from the healthcare. And then I'm also representing UNEP on the UN country team Pakistan from UNEP. So again, our UNCT, we are working on the Sustainable Development Country Framework, where again, we are focusing on the basin restoration. So it's again coming with all the aspects, whether you talk about the mining, you talk about the fishing, you talk about the irrigation, water, and you talking about the transport, whether it be the land transport or marine transport and so on. So again, my whole point is that we should focus in holistic manner. When we talk about the ecosystem restoration, we just may not like go just to mangroves restoration as a stand alone, but how the mangroves for the even the vegetation and so on, how the mangroves can even help not to encroach the sea to the land. Suppose in Badin and so on, there's a lot of encroachment of the sea. Same goes with the highlands, that how the restoration of the forest on the one hand can create a lot of food and other resources for the people, but more important, lights. They can help to bring the water unpolluted to the rivers and so on. So basically, as the STPI has been working very hard over the years, and I really congratulate everyone, and especially Dr. Ahmed, and more important, my previous boss, who was the deputy forward to the very well this session, but more important, how we go to the 2030. So if we take some resolutions, with decisions, some monitoring system by the STPI to see what we can achieve by 2030, it will be a big success. So on that note, again, thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Shafkat Munir. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Memon Saab. I think you have elaborated a lot of things, clubbing all these sectors together, because every human action that is actually damaging or using ecosystem, and if it is not repaired, then continuously we will be having the problem. It's been a debate when the scenarios are building up more than 2.7 degrees. This is actually the nature-based solution and the ecosystem restoration that may help humanity to survive. That's why this is important, and Dr. Memon has raised a lot of connectivities together, how we can work on different sectors, making all sectors together in one stream to look at ecosystem restoration. Thank you once again, Dr. Memon. And now, first, I would like to thank the World Food Program, Pakistan office and international office for supporting us for organizing this session. And we have two eminent speakers from World Food Program as well. Then we will go to other speakers. Over to you, Adam. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Now I will try to share my screen. I am unable to, it says that host disabled participant screen sharing. Do you know how I can get my presentation up? No problem. Okay, are you able to see the screen now? Then I will kick off. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you to SDPI for hosting this important event. Of course, to all the participants for attending, and to all the other panelists today for what I'm sure will be very interesting and important presentations. I'm Adam Civelli. I am a climate risk specialist with the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT, better known as the Alliance, which is part of CGIAR. I'm based in Hanoi, in Vietnam, and Iftikhar Abbas from the World Food Program is in Islamabad today, I believe, maybe at the presentation. Sorry, at the conference in person. Just to introduce the Research Reduction Unit, in collaboration with their Research Assessment and Monitoring Unit, engaged CGIAR to identify needs preemptively supporting the climate resilience of vulnerable communities in 9 high geographies around the world. This analysis included a mixed methods research plan with desk review, climate change modeling, impact mock-ups, and key informant interviews. Today, I will present a summary of the analytical outputs and recommendations that were made for Pakistan. So to begin with, we performed climate forecasting and economic modeling at the national level in Pakistan to understand how climate change is likely to impact agricultural production and food security through 2050. So here are these results at the national level using were produced using a combination of scenarios. Overall, this combination envisions a bleak climate change outlook, unfortunately, where warming is exacerbated by increased fossil fuel use. However, some of the worst impacts in terms of food availability are partly offset by an optimistic forecast of enhanced technology and education levels. So while this socioeconomic development is in line with recent trends in Pakistan, the projections deal with a projected mean global temperature increase between 1.4 and 2.6 degrees Celsius by 2050 over 2005 levels. Now, if you look at the graph, indicate temperatures. The bars at the bottom indicate precipitation. This data, again, is at the national level, so significant local variations will exist in a country as large and geographically diverse as Pakistan. But the key here is really to read the chart in combination with the key growing seasons, Kharif and Rabi, which are indicated season areas in Pakistan are very dry, meaning a lot of agricultural production depends on groundwater. It's drawn from the Indus Basin and various irrigation networks. But generally, both seasons are quite dry throughout the country. Less than 100 millimeters of rainfall is generally considered to be a dry month. And as you can see here, no month receives more than 30 millimeters of rain historically, currently, or into the future. Also, what you'll see here is sort of that growing seasons, the precipitation patterns shift, where the beginning of the growing season is likely to get wetter. The growing season will dry out.
Panel here. When I prepared for today's panel, I thought, looking at what I have seen mainly in KP, but also in Punjab, not so much in the other provinces, Sindh and Balochistan, where would I advise to have a kind of minimum consensus, kind of minimum standard, so to speak, for local governance system, which might or might not then, let's say, be used in a kind of reformulated Article 148, but could also be part of a kind of political consensus between the parties and the decision makers at both federal and provincial level. So one of these would definitely be define what is really the purpose and the rationality of local government. Of course, there's again a huge range of reasons why countries, provinces engage in local governance reforms and push for something like decentralization. I think there needs to be an understanding about the modalities of decentralization. And again, coming back to what I call the science of decentralization, there's a kind of acceptance of what are different modalities and what distinguish different modalities like devolution, delegation, deconcentration. The word used in Pakistan is mostly devolution. If I look at some of the arrangements that are likely to be part of the new local government act in Punjab, my feeling is the understanding of the term of devolution is not really in line with what literature and science would tell you. So it needs to be clear, what are we talking about? And there are certain principles which I like to see in the kind of overarching legal framework for local governments. Principles, because I think it's totally necessary for each province to reflect on what kind of local government system would fit our own context, would fit our requirements. But these considerations should be guided with certain principles. And that is really my main point that I want to emphasize today. One principle, unified administration at local level. I think what I mean with unified administration is really the ability and the legal mandate of local governments to control the human resources, to control their budgets. If I look at some of the stipulations in local government acts in provinces, I would say that doesn't exist. Even service delivery, and Amina mentioned that earlier, I would say 89% of service delivery is still with provincial officials, provincial organizations. Although in the Local Government Act, it might appear as devolved. Why? Because most of the officials working for cities, municipal corporations, TMAs, they're provincial employees. They're not hired and fired by the local government. And I think what experience worldwide shows that if local governments really want to engage in service delivery and be held accountable for the kind of service delivery, having responsibility for those key issues, staffing, financing, is a key. If local governments don't know what kind of chief officer, TMA officer, municipal officer they will get, because these bodies are organized by the provincial level through those local government boards, local council boards, they will have very little relationship with these people. And these people will have very little relationships with the local governments they are serving in. So that is one key aspect where other countries also have struggled to say, okay, if we do decentralization, if we give powers and functions to the local government level, we also have to give them powers and functions about human resources and about finances. It's not an easy process, but I think that is one of those elements of a change management process that needs to come after you have passed or approved a local government. Second principle, intermunicipal cooperation. There are many countries where the experience of local governments working together has proved and has brought good results. It's often capacity, the argument of capacity was brought up already. That's often the case that if people or the policymakers realize the capacity at the local level to deliver services might not be there, that takes the function back to the provincial level or national level in a unitary state, which is not necessarily the right approach. In many countries, services like water, solid waste management, public transport are organized jointly by 2, 3, 4 different local governments together under specific arrangements. So that is one principle I would like to see in the constitution. The principle of local provincial cooperation, which is more like getting the mindset right to understand that in a multi-level governance system, no level is totally autonomous. Local government cannot deliver without the provincial level cannot deliver without the local government level, the federal level cannot deliver without having provincial and local government level on board. Fourth criteria, we need to assign or we need to spell out criteria, principles, how certain functions should be given to the local government level. There's huge variety across the provinces in Pakistan. Municipal service seems to be the standard all over, but if it comes to social services, for instance, health, education, etc., there are huge differences. And it's often not clear why certain functions have been given to the local level or why they have been kept at the higher levels of government. This principle, match of expenditure assignments and revenue assignments. No local government can perform unless financial resources are there. And many countries, or many governments, I should say, like to dump functions, responsibilities on the local level, but keep the resources for themselves, creating what economists call those vertical fiscal imbalances. And I think that also has happened here in Pakistan, but it's not the only example for that. So having that matched together would be an important precondition for local governments to perform. And the last point I would like to highlight, and I mean, that would be interesting also for Niadullah to respond to that one, that the relationship between, let's say, the provincial policymakers and federal policymakers with policymaking at the local government level. Well, I would like to see a much stronger differentiation and in a way a separation Pakistan is not the only country where, I mean, members of the assemblies have their own development funds for, I mean, infrastructure projects or other development projects in their localities. Philippines also has this kind of arrangements. My observation is always it interferes with the, let's say, the delimitation of responsibilities and mandates between the levels. So for me, having a stricter separation on these issues would be another key principle, which of course is then highly contested also in the policy areas. I think my time is running up. So I would stop here. My presentation can be shared. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
May I now invite Dr. Amir Taj from Institute of Management Sciences, IM Sciences, KP. He will be delivering his remarks online.
Hi, everyone. I hope I am audible to each and every one of you. Can you please confirm? Hi. Am I audible? So can
yes,
anyone? So can anyone please enable screen sharing?
Can you please little bit loud?
Yes, what I'm saying is, can you please enable this screen sharing option for me, please, so that I can, put on display my presentation.
Okay, sir. Hamza, can you share screen? It's loud, sir.
So the option that I have over here is, it is disabled, I presume. Okay. I hope the screen is visible to you. All right. Can I continue?
Yes, sir, please.
All right. All right. So thank you very much. I won't, take a lot of time in introducing the topic for today. In fact, one of the advantages of being the last speaker in such occasions is that, most of the points that I wanted to discuss have already been discussed. I'll quickly, cover up the points that haven't been discussed so far. So we all know about this post 18th Amendment scenario, Article 140A, whereby these provinces were mandated to formulate and administer local government reforms. Before that, there were three major phases of reforms, and they were, there was one element in all those three phases of reform, that was commonality as far as their structures and as far as their implementation was concerned. So they were pretty much the same for all four provinces. And as we saw after the 18th Amendment, probably 2013 onwards, I've worked primarily on the case of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa local government reform. So we had this kind of different system in place. And one of the most peculiar features of that was that it was the first ever phase of local government reforms that was introduced and then implemented by a democratically elected government in KP. So local government systems in these four provinces are different in terms of mandate that has been given to local government, the very electoral systems. This has been discussed as well. Also, we need to look at all this issue from a very broader perspective. So priorities of the political parties cannot be ignored in all four provinces. Other than that, there is, I won't call it discrepancy, but there is, there are differences as far as allocation of funds mechanism is concerned. Also, the interinstitutional and intergovernmental relationships between different levels of government and different institutions of government. So this was a bit of a background. You see, the delegation of authority for establishing of local government to the provinces, it conforms to the very spirit of federalism and decentralization. However, as we all know, that the lack of minimum consensus that relates to structuring of local government system in four provinces is it's proving to be a stumbling block in the process of institutionalization of local government reforms. So this commonality of mechanisms, that I presume is the biggest issue, looking at it from a bird's eye view. There is commonality of mechanisms adopted by civil administration and district level bureaucracy, and of course, their respective provincial governments in 4 provinces. But when it comes to the diversity of local government structures in 4 provinces, this has resulted in a disarray. Why? Because local governments have to work in tandems with civil administration and district bureaucracy. So I'm not technically speaking all in favor of a 100% complete uniform system for all these provinces, but we have to consider the fact that since they work in tandems with each other, there has to be some level of commonality when it comes to structuring them and then, of course, implementing them. That is the point for, I would say, debate today. Critical considerations in current scenario. Most of these points, as I said, have been discussed, but I'll just quickly go through them. One is, of course, the legal framework, and as they say, the devil lies in the details. So the detailed modalities of the local government system matters a lot. As such, rules of business, the functional assignments, responsibilities, and other than that, the authority that has been given in letter and spirit for locally elected political representatives, that is of key concern. Other than that, we also have to take into account the money matters. To what extent are these local governments going to be capacitated for revenue generation and public expenditure patterns? Other than that, we also have to look at the complementarity of other social accountability mechanisms, particularly in case of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So these mechanisms have to be quite synchronized with the local government systems. I'm referring to the laws such as right to information and right to services. And then one of the presenters in the beginning talked about this point. It was about continuity of the local government system and its legal constitutional protection. That remains, a kind